Hi, my name's Phil Szomszor, and I'm joined today by PR consultant, author, advisor, speaker, Sangeeta Waldron. Hi, Sangeeta, how are you doing?
I'm great, Phil. It's really good to be here with you.
Wonderful. Well, we're here to talk about the craft of communications, and that's finding your voice and using it with impact. And we haven't seen each other face to face in some time. We met at a couple of blogging events or something like that back in the day, some time ago. But I have been watching you on LinkedIn, and I thought you'd just be an ideal guest for what we're doing today. But before we start, let's find out a little bit about you. Can you tell us about what you do, Monday to Friday, or based on our pre-chat, sometimes weekends, how you help people and what you do for a living?
Hi, yes, Phil. So when you say back in the day, I think the last time we connected was pre-pandemic. So that's going way back.
Yes.
And as to what I do week to week, so fundamentally, I'm a comms professional. I work with my clients. I have my own agency, Serendipity PR and Media, and I work with all types of clients, but they're clients that feel right to me, and we are aligned with our values. That's really important. And so I help them with their campaigns, their strategic thinking, even write speeches for some clients, depending on what their goals are, what their aspirations are. I also guest lecture at universities, and I'm currently guest lecturing at Regent's University on creating a brand identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting because working or going in and communicating with the next generation keeps you fresh. You understand what's happening. It's also market intelligence, as I like to see it. And then I write for different platforms. I also write books. And my last book, which came out in 2025, is about the climate crisis and is called What Will Your Legacy Be? Conversations with Global Change Makers about the Climate Crisis. A very catchy title.
They're always long, aren't they? You can't
Yeah,
have a title for a book now. It's got to have a kind of in two parts.
yeah, yes. So that is me in a nutshell.
And what made you decide to write books? Because you've got, am I right in thinking you've written 3 books? Where does that come from? Because they're obviously a huge time investment. Every author I've ever spoken to says I'm not doing it for the money. So I'm going to guess that you're in that bracket too. So where does it come from?
That's absolutely right. You don't write books for money. And I've always wanted to write right from a child. And my mother used to say to me, one day you will write a book. And she used to say that to me when I was about 6 or 7. And I always thought I would write novels, not business books. So that was, that's been a surprise to myself. And it was in I can't even remember the years now, but I think it was in 2018, a publisher came to me and asked whether I would write a book about PR.
Mm-hmm.
And I said no, because I didn't feel ready. And then suddenly I felt ready, like 3 months later. I thought, no, I'm ready. I want to do this. And it was just before Christmas. And they said, can you get your proposal in? And I quickly got it in. And that was my first book, my first sort of venture into writing. And I worked with an amazing and an incredible PR gentleman. And he is considered the sort of the godfather of PR in the US, Don Stackman.
Okay.
I'm terrible with names at the moment.
I'm always terrible with names. I'm terrible with pronouncing names. That's my as well as remembering them. So
but he actually was my editor, and I realised, you write, but you really need a good editor. And then my second and third book is a different publisher, and I had fantastic editors to work with me, and I just enjoy the whole process of writing, and it's sharing knowledge as well.
Good. Well, we're going to talk about a few topics that relate to all of this. And the first one I want to open up with is really about purpose-led communication. So, I mean, you spend a bit of time looking at your LinkedIn, as I do. That comes across very, very clearly in your work. And even the remark that you just made then about the kind of clients that you want to work with. You know, they have to appeal to you in a certain way, and I'm going to guess that some of that is around purpose. You may correct me on that, but can you tell us a little bit about where this comes from for you, what purpose-led communications actually even means today? I think it's sort of a topic that's probably needs explaining because people have a different take on it.
Yeah. So where did it come from? So I've setting up my own agency, Serendipity PR, in 2009. I was working for corporates, and I was also working for not-for-profits. And when I was working for the charity sector, we were working with some really well-known corporate brands, and they would say this is their purpose, this is what they wanted to do, and that's why they wanted to work with the charity. But a lot of it was just flimsy, and there were lots of demands on the charity, and that got me thinking at that time, this is not really authentic, and they're not being authentic with their own brand, and they've just chosen the charity because it makes them look good. And then fast forward to 2020, when we were sort of going through the pandemic, we're all sitting at home, I started to see a lot of data come through about corporate social responsibility, and that brands were now changing their thinking, and they were really investing in CSR. And CSR wasn't just something that was bolted on to human resources or to communications, but it was something that brands were really investing in, because we, the consumer, we were looking at brands and we were really wanting to invest in brands ourselves that were doing better by the planet. And we also and employees wanted to be part of something where they felt they were working with brands that were doing better for the planet. So that was where my thinking came. And I've always been pro planet. And in 2020, I started to write my second book, which is CSR is Not PR. And that stemmed from watching the wildfires taking place in Australia. And I was thinking, what could I do to help businesses think better, do better? And that's how the thinking of the second book came about. So I've kind of jumped around here, but essentially, I think I've always believed in purpose. And I think when you are clear on your purpose, you just do better as a citizen and as a brand and as a business leader.
I mean, you're talking there about purpose, but can you kind of give us some examples of what that looks like in practice, whether that's companies that are doing it well or just examples of something we might see in the media or on social media?
Well, first of all, your purpose and your values are the same thing. So they need to be baked into your business strategy if you're a business, organization, brand. And why baked into your business strategy? Because then everyone in the organization knows what you're working towards. There is no confusion. It's also part of your internal comms. You know, your values aren't just something that sit in a drawer. You need to be communicating with your workforce, with your teams, and it's a top-down, bottom-up, sideways approach. And some good examples. There's I buy from a small brand. It's a small business, and they do natural deodorants. But what's interesting about the brand is that they really believe in their values, their commitments, what they're doing. So it's all part of their comms. It's all part of their branding. It's all part of their storytelling. There's no confusion. And when you work that way as a brand, your PR works for you. You know, there's no effort because people are talking about you. And I've been talking about this brand so much that they've got, I'm sure they're getting free PR from it, but that's good. You're talking about the brand. You're talking about, you're investing in the brand as well as a consumer. You become a loyal customer. So good examples of that. Well, this little brand called Roller. There's another brand called Riverford Farms.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with those.
What they do. Business leaders, I think Deborah Meaden, she stands by her values. You know what she's about. Yeah, and big brands, the Co-op, again, Marks and Spencers, they do a good job with their values. And I think what's really important is nothing is perfect, but the most important thing is to start. If you can commit to 3 values, that's enough. Having more than 4 or 5 becomes confusing for a organization because there's too many to remember. But
Yeah,
if you can
yeah,
commit to 3 or 4 and do them well, then you are on the right path. And that's baked into your business strategy. So you're not drifting here and there. Your values, make you steadfast.
yeah, yeah. I can buy into that, and I think most people listening or watching this can buy into it. But I'm going to play devil's advocate for a little bit, just to kind of tease more out the conversation, because I think one of the things that we've probably all seen is the effect of the Trump administration and how that has perhaps changed the way that a lot of organizations think about purpose-led initiatives like sustainability or diversity, equity, inclusion, those sorts of things. And we've seen a lot of those brands roll back their plans and their commitments. Is that something that you recognize? Do you see it as being a problem? I mean, do consumers care as much as they used to, or is it being led more by the boardroom or investors? How do you sort of see that situation emerging?
First of all, when Trump came in this time round and he rolled back on diversity and inclusion, it did create a ripple effect. At the same time, he also wheeled back on climate change and climate frameworks and climate science, data and market intelligence. I think now, where we are, March 2026, if we think that Trump's administration has got any kind of credibility, I think we're probably concussed, because look at the state of the world right now.
Yeah.
And if you're a brand and you're thinking, okay, a new government's come in and it's saying, we'll back on your diversity and inclusion. And then 4 years later, you've got a new government saying, we're committed. What does that mean to you as a brand? That means you're just flaky. Your brand values are not baked into your own business strategy, which is what we were saying earlier. So you're just governments come and go, but you as a brand with your values, you should be steadfast. You should know what you're working towards, because that has a knock-on effect, because then you know what kind of employees you're employing. Your employees know what kind of brand and business they're working for. Your suppliers know who you are. Your customers know who you are. So those brands, and I think really those brands that might have paid any attention to what President Trump said at the beginning, I think will probably be back on track and investing in their diversity and inclusion frameworks, because there's lots of reports that are out. McKinsey brought out a report in 2023 saying those companies that were more diverse, more inclusive, were more innovative, they had more resilience, they could ride the course of ups and downs and challenges. So yes, and while there might have been a few brands, I think that I'm sure they're now investing in their diversity. And the other thing is the world is global. Everything is connected. So you would want an intelligent workforce with cultural intelligence that knows how to communicate with other people around the world and enter markets. If you don't have that kind of board intelligence, how are you going to navigate that?
Yeah, and I agree with everything you say. And one of the ones that I remember being quite disappointed with was Emma Walmsley, who's the chief executive. I don't know if she's still the chief
No,
executive.
she's not.
Yeah, she was at the time.
Yeah.
When Trump came back in and then rolled back their diversity plans, I think it was, and it was reported in a number of places like The Guardian. And I was disappointed on a number of levels, because I'd looked at her on LinkedIn, and she was one of the executives that I gave as an example of somebody that's a good connected leader that's doing things well online. And then you think, it's it just sort of give a bit of a sigh, really, because you think that you build up an expectation of somebody and of an organization, and then you kind of feel a little bit let down.
Yes, and and one of the few women at that time,
Yeah, yeah,
heading a big global brand. And she would have, I'm sure she would have had to fought to get up to that role, that position. It doesn't come easy for women in those kinds of roles. And then to draw up the drawbridge, I don't know, it was. I remember reading the story at the time, and I thought, how disappointing.
yeah.
What kind of message to other women? But also, why would you, because the Trump administration is saying something, why would you follow that as a strategic management framework? Why would you implement that?
Well, because they're being threatened, aren't they? I mean, these organizations, I mean, we've seen it in places like in education in America, where they've been threatened about putting out certain kind of content or teaching students in a certain way, and then they're told that they're going to have their funding removed. I mean, it's coercive, authoritarian behavior. And I suppose when you're responsible for a bunch of shareholders, and I'm not giving her a let off, by the way, but when you have these responsibilities to your stakeholders, then I'm assuming that she just felt that was the least bad option, but it's still a disappointment.
Well, AstraZeneca didn't wheel back, and they're their main competitor.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
And so, lots of other organisations didn't wheel back.
Yeah.
Lots of banks didn't make big statements. So I don't really hold with that. And I know we're going to talk more about this, but it's about being bold in your communications. It's about knowing your value. So if GSK did not have any diversity frameworks, I would have thought, okay, that's not one of their values.
Mm.
But if they had spent the last 5 years or 6 years or whatever investing in that and recruiting staff, then why would you just quickly erode all that away? And also, what kind of message does that send to your workforce?
Yeah. Yeah. I know some companies have taken a stance of they're not dropping it, but they're just not talking about it so much. So they're still making those investments and having those commitments and having it part of the business plan. But I think even then, that's a bit of that's still there's still a shame, isn't it? That you're not doing it for PR as per the title of your book, but you have to tell the story for it to stick and for people to believe it and for action to be taken. I mean, that is the power of storytelling, isn't it? So if you're stopping talking about it, I'm assuming it's not going to work, right?
Yeah, it's not. And so you're not telling the good story. But I think we're all now so wrapped up in everything being perfect, but perfect doesn't exist. And it's just about doing things better.
Mm.
And if you're doing things better and you're doing it with commitment and passion, then why not talk about it? If you
Yeah.
don't believe in it, then who will?
Well, let's move on to some practical steps then, because that's a good segue point. And I think you used the term being bolder previously, and I've also heard you use the word brave as well. So from an individual, so look at this from an individual lens. If somebody's listening or watching this says, right, I buy into that, but for me as a communicator, how can I live my life with this purpose and communicate in this particular way? And what does being bolder or braver mean in practice? What kind of tips would you give somebody if they had that aspiration?
Well, first of all, being bolder and braver is not just in the workplace, but it's also within your own community. So it means being conscious. And by conscious, it also, I believe, it means understanding the facts, knowing the facts. So it would mean investing in yourself, reading a little bit more, maybe being involved with your local, whatever it is, your local climate initiative, or if you're thinking about women's issues, whatever, there are loads of local grassroots organizations where you can start to gain your knowledge, whatever your value is, your passion, your commitment. So be informed would be my first step, be informed. And then when you're informed, you feel in a position of authority, you've become a little bit of an expert, and then you can talk about it in the workplace. And talking about it in the workplace can be things as simple as your team meetings, you can create lunchtime initiatives. So I know somebody like me is very pro-planet, believes in the climate crisis. She invested in herself. She did some training, and then she started lunchtime talks where she talked about what she understood about the climate crisis and how that was impacting the agency and the kind of clients they were working with, collaborating with. And it also adds value to your clients because you're coming in with another string to your bow and you're able to advise them on what's happening or maybe how that works better in a piece of comms or communication. So I would start with investing in yourself. And that doesn't have to be, onerous. I'm not talking about months of training. It's just being aware, being conscious, and investing in yourself. And you also feel when you are investing in yourself, you also feel more purposeful. It feels good.
I think there's a thing about where you're getting information from as well, isn't there? Because it's really easy to find yourself getting your news from Instagram or TikTok or things like that, because we're using those things for entertainment or whatever. And then you start, because you're interested in politics, you get served clips of Trump or whatever. I mean, I'm getting way too much of that because I'm listening to too much of news agents and all that kind of thing. But then what you're getting isn't really balanced, accurate, checked. So I think there is a piece around finding trusted sources of credible sources of information. I think I kind of lost that a little bit in a way.
100%. And you're right. And I think you and I come from the generation where there was a time when we weren't getting all our information from the internet. We were reading newspapers or magazines, which were credible. We were watching terrestrial TV. We didn't have online streaming. So now we're all in silos where we get our information from. And it's about, if you are investing in yourself, you want to invest in the right things. So it would be credible sources. And there are lots of things out there. I mean, Greenpeace, if you are interested in the planet, Greenpeace is a credible source. Friends of the Earth. You've got Al Gore's got an organization called Climate Reality Leaders. There's lots of great information. Cambridge does a sustainability and comms training. Oxford does one. So lots of universities do. So if you really, Chartered Institute of Marketing does a sustainability.
And are they? I mean, I'm not aware of some of those actually. So are they free courses, or how would you access those? Are they YouTube series or things that you pay for? How do you get hold of that?
Chartered Institute of Marketing and the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, you'll have to pay for those. The Climate Reality, being trained by Al Gore's organization, you can apply. Depending on where they hold the training, you'll have to pay your travel and your stay, but everything else is free.
Oh, okay.
Training is free. You have books. People like me who've written books to make it easy for people to understand. Yeah, buy books. If reading is a great skill. Invest in yourself. Buy a book. Audio books. Listen to credible podcasts. There are so many things you can gain knowledge, and you should be constantly learning, because we should be constantly learning because the news is constantly changing, and the climate, everything is constantly in flux. So you need to be on top of things.
Yeah, good tip. What else have you got? So, I mean, we've covered that one in quite a lot of detail, but being informed is clearly a major one. How else could somebody improve their bravery or boldness when it comes to their communication skills?
I think being an active local community member, know what's going on in your neighbourhood, your local community, your local newspaper. If you're still lucky enough to have a local newspaper, they keep you informed, and it's empowering. Being involved in local projects is empowering. That makes you bolder. It makes you braver. When you're in a network with others, it makes you bolder, it makes you braver, and
Mm,
you're learning from each other.
mm.
Also, thinking about the next generation makes you bolder, makes you braver. And one of the things I learned when I was writing this book about the climate crisis is Indigenous communities in America, the original Native Americans, they have something called seventh generational thinking. So
Okay.
any decisions they make now, they will also think, what's the impact in generational, in 7 generations ahead?
Yeah.
And now in Wales and I think in Japan, they've started to use that thinking in business. So whatever impact that business is thinking or thinking of implementing, what will be the impact in
Yeah.
7 years' time, or the seventh generation?
When you were talking earlier about the purpose-led communication side of things and taking a long-term view, it made me think of one of the types of culture I've always admired is Japanese business culture, because they take this kind of 100-year view on their planning. They're planning way ahead. Similar with China as well. They're not thinking immediately, and I think our Western culture tends to just think very much in these terms of sort of wanting things straight away. So I think that the point you've just made resonates with me, certainly.
Yeah, I think there is, I mean, also you might think the world constantly changes, but I think even if you just start with purpose and you're thinking about how can I make something better? How can this business just be doing better? How can my communications just be doing better? And being honest, that in itself is an action.
Mm,
And one of the things, and it's as simple as talking about it. It's one of the most powerful things you can do. And there is a climate scientist called Catherine Hayhoe, who's quite well known. And she says one of the most important things, the most powerful things you can do as a communicator is talk about the climate crisis. And that opens up a conversation. So people working in comms, we have a gift, and that gift is to connect, to help people understand the story. And we should be using that power and be bold and brave with that power. So it's like having you're your superhero in your own story.
yeah. And that communicating about something like the climate crisis or any other issue that might be important to somebody, I suppose there's a way of doing that as well, and a technique that involves not lecturing people or trying to beat people in an argument, and also listening a lot more, because I don't think as a society we don't listen enough either.
We don't. And I would say all the comms people I've met within the climate movement are very respectful. It's about being respectful. It's about listening. It's about all those good things you should be doing anyway as a comms professional: active listening, engagement. You don't want to become a bore. You won't be invited back. So yes, it's all those good skills you learn, and it's about having respectful conversations with people on any topic, which is something that the climate deniers are not. So
That is true. I think we can agree on that. Well, let's pause there or park it there for the time being. But I do want to ask you a few more questions, and I've written these down on a piece of paper because I
go
won't
on.
remember them. Some quick fire questions, Sangeeta. So before we wrap up, so you're an author, as we've mentioned before. Whose writing inspires you to write?
That's an interesting question, because I would think it would be more what inspires me to write. And nature, she inspires me to write.
Okay.
My relationship with nature inspires me. But if I think of writers, maybe people like Naomi Klein, Sir David Attenborough, Malcolm Gladwell, so those some of the top names.
My children absolutely love David Attenborough. They,
Who
yeah,
doesn't?
yeah. I mean, he is more than a national treasure.
Yeah.
So, what's the marketing or piece of business lingo that you would like to banish from everyday communication?
Oh, I hate reaching out. I'm just reaching out. Because when I see an email, I always think of a hand coming through. But I
Grabbing you from the screen.
yeah, it also makes me think of a song, but I can't, there's a song in my head every time I hear it as well. But yeah, I don't like that term.
Okay, we'll banish that one for you. If only we had that power. Okay, what is your most surprising climate or sustainability factoid?
Can I give two?
Go on, please.
One is when I was writing this book, I spoke to a humpback whale researcher.
Okay,
And
as you did.
humpback whales are absolutely magical. They're genius creatures because what they actually provide a service for us. They absorb CO2 from the atmosphere and take it down to the ocean bed and secrete it out as pellets. And they provide a service. So CO2, I thought that's one. The other one is, and I've actually written this one down because as I told you, I don't remember sometimes things very well. But with this latest conflict going on in the Middle East, the Climate and Community Institute did a quick analysis, and that the total greenhouse gas emissions from the first 14 days of this conflict has created more than 5 million tons of CO2, which is higher than the total climate population of Iceland in 2024. So climate and war are we forget that.
That's not a story that's coming through in the media, is it?
No,
Let's be honest. Yeah.
no. So I think that we need to join the dots.
Yeah.
We have to be cleverer to join those dots.
Yeah. Well, two important, very different ones, but two important factoids. Thank you for those. And what is your biggest climate or sustainability myth? What do we think that we shouldn't think?
Oh, that China isn't doing anything positive for the planet. And in fact, China is the country that has invested in renewables and is trying to cut its CO2 emissions. And it has done an incredible job of investing in renewable energy.
There's a really good story in the Sunday Times at the weekend. I bought a newspaper for the first time in over a year, so it's so well done me. But there's a really good piece in there about what they're doing in Beijing around this,
yes,
and how they've only a few years ago they had major smog problems, and a lot of it due to industrialization and concrete and all of those kind of things. But they've got what they call a blue sky policy or initiative. I mean, you'll know about all this, but it was news to me. And I mean, they've just completely eliminated it, and compared to before at least, and the investment in it. And I think, as you say, there's this myth about China not sort of doing its bit there, but yet again, they're showing us how to commit and probably follow through on a plan.
They've planted swathes of forests.
The piece mentioned that actually as well. Yeah.
So the other thing with China, of course, yes, it has been a polluter, but it's transitioned and it's still transitioning. And a lot of China's CO2 was because of us. And you kind of mentioned it earlier, that we looked to China to create a lot of our plastic products. A lot of the plastic products needs petroleum. So we all need to be better informed.
Yeah, not to mention electronics and all of that stuff, but there we go. And final question, if you weren't working in communications in the PR world, what would you be doing instead?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think my husband would say, he says, oh, you could get an Oscar for that because it's dramatic. But I would like to think I would have trained to be some kind of stand-up comedian.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think I'm funny. Yeah, so that's
your husband is Leslie.
He always says to me, you should be you should be on the stage. He said you should be on the stage sweeping it. So, that makes me laugh.
Very supportive. But, yeah. Oh, okay. And where does that come from? Is that just you like the act of performance or the reaction you get from a crowd, or you just like making people laugh?
No, I mean I don't do. I have never stood on stage, but I think it comes from my parents. My parents were very funny. My mother was very funny, and she liked making people laugh. And it's joyful. it's better than making people cry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it's when we are positive, life is just better.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do a link because one of the guests I'm hoping to get on soon is a guy called Stuart Goldsmith, who is
Oh my
a
God,
climate
yes,
comedian. You
yes,
probably know him, but others may not.
yeah,
He started off as a stand-up. He's got a brilliant podcast. I've met him a couple of times, and yeah, he's furrowed out his own path as a climate comedian. So
yeah. He's genius and he's funny,
yeah,
so
he's very good.
yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we've run out of time, I'm afraid, but I've got one more question to ask you in a minute. But thank you so much for coming on. I've learned
It's been
tons
a
speaking
pleasure.
to you. I'd love to speak to you more about these things. So we'll do that face to face next time.
No, I've loved being in conversation with you, and thank you for thinking of me. Really
Oh.
enjoyed myself.
And we'll put in the show notes at the bottom, we'll put the links to your books and all of that stuff so that
Thank you.
people can go and find those and follow you on social media as well. But my final question is, what is your motto in life?
Oh, I think, yeah, that's a good question. My motto in life is, and I've learnt this actually from my husband, don't give up.
Hmm.
He always says, don't give up. Remember, he always says to me, remember, a family motto is remember you're a Waldron. So by that, you don't give up.
Yeah.
That's what he says to us, when we've been on long hikes and things. And he says, remember you're a Waldron. You never give up. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that sounds like a good one with your mission around purpose and sustainability and all those things. And we were discussing this also before we started. You've been in business since, was it 2009, is it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's not an example of never giving up, because it's not easy doing what we do. So there you go.
No, it's not. And I'll just quickly say something. When I set up my business in 2009, it was during the global recession. And I thought, if I can survive this, then I know I can survive anything. And so that was my litmus test.
Yeah, still going. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much,
Thank
Sangeeta.
you.
All that remains to say is let's play the music.